Now I'm operating on the fundamental assumption that you love reading as much as I do. We both love reading, we both know how important it is to us, so don't get me wrong. But Lichtenberg is challenging the notion that it's always a good thing to be reading as much as possible, and always taking all these answers from what other people have written instead of thinking for yourself. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Delicious. How's it going? Today I'm reviewing a beautiful book sent to me by a longtime friend, fan, and supporter of the show, Seneca. Today is The Waste Books by Georg Christoph Lichtenberg, who was the unintentional father of the aphorism in German literature, according to the introduction by R.J. Hollingdale, who translated Nietzsche, and we'll talk about him a little bit more. Lichtenberg was a scientist and satirist, which is very refreshing. I don't think I've ever seen that combination ever. He was a very unique fellow. He was a physicist. He discovered this thing here represented on the cover of the book. I was like, oh, what a beautiful cover, but I had no idea what it was. They call this a Lichtenberg figure. It's an electrical discharge pattern that resembles kind of a fern or a tree. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So this is a collection of aphorisms, or kind of one-liners from his waste books. It's a collection of his journals, basically. They're titled with letters of the alphabet, A, B, C, I think it's like A through L, and the book separates them in chapters corresponding to the years they were written. So Lichtenberg may not be very well known over here, but among his fans he can count, Einstein, Tolstoy, Nietzsche, Freud, Wittgenstein, and Schopenhauer. So he was indeed influential. How he's not more well known is a mystery to me. But this is not a stuffy collection of scientific theories, anything but. I haven't read Ralph Waldo Emerson yet, but I think it's probably closer. My guess is it's probably closer to that. It's just an entertaining collection of thoughts throughout his lifetime. It sort of like acts as kind of an, a journal, like an intellectual journal, where he writes ideas, and some of them he expounds upon later or kind of reworks and refines. And there are certainly themes that are consistent throughout his lifetime, but it's just interesting to read all of these ideas that concerned this one man his whole life, or for a large part of it. It's just an entertaining collection of his thoughts throughout his lifetime, with plenty of humor. Lichtenberg was an interesting guy. He had not an easy life. He had kind of a hunchback that resulted from a childhood injury that never got treated properly. And this had an impact, I've read, on his breathing when he got older. He was also kind of an Anglophile, went over to England a couple of times, I think, and really enjoyed himself, really admired the English. Yeah, he had a fascinating life, certainly, but a tough one. So this was originally published in 1990 and was translated by R.J. Hollingdale, who was an English translator of German authors. Most famously Nietzsche, I think. And he was apparently very helpful, along with Walter Kaufmann, in reclaiming the reputation of Nietzsche post-World War II, because the Nazis sort of adopted Nietzsche's philosophy, so they say, and I think Nietzsche's sister was sort of involved in that in a very dubious manner. Of course, Nietzsche, had he been alive during that time, probably would have been horrified. Anyways, Hollingdale, very interesting guy. He also translated E.T.A. Hoffmann, and sure enough, I picked this up recently, The Tales of Hoffmann. And sure enough, this edition that I purchased is the one translated by Hollingdale. So, looking forward to that. And Hoffmann I learned about from the beautifully transgressive author Gabriel Witkop, who I reviewed not too long ago, who I believe also translated E.T.A. Hoffmann, but possibly into French? I'm not sure. Small world. The plot thickens. After a few decades of reading, I imagine this literary world probably gets pretty small. Anyways, this is a beautiful edition from NYRB. Full disclosure, I am partially sponsored by them in that they send me free books sometimes. However, again, this was a gift from Seneca. Another company that works with NYRB, because they have great taste, is the sponsor of today's video, Boxwalla. Boxwalla is this awesome bi-monthly subscription service that curates boxes personalized to your taste. They have 3 different kinds of boxes: books, beauty, and film. With the book box, they showcase literature from around the world, including forgotten classics and contemporary fiction. Each book box contains 2 books housed in a box. Boxwalla chooses one book that everybody gets, and then subscribers can choose the other from several options. For the June book box, everybody will be getting a copy of Abdul Munif's Cities of Salt, which looks excellent, and there's a nice blurb from Graham Greene on the cover there, and I really need to read this one. Been meaning to for a while. And then your choices would be Happening by Annie Ernaux, The Summer Book by Tove Jansson, or Little Snow Landscape by Robert Walser. And I've been meaning to read Walser for some time. I think I'm gonna pick that one up soon. And for this box, they also send this very cool Bronte Sisters notebook. It's just a little notebook with some nice paper in there, very cool. From Obvious State. All of our notebooks are made with care in Portland, Oregon. Neighbors. For their film box, they work exclusively with the Criterion Collection, curating from their collection of films. Only the best. And in the beauty boxes, they showcase plant-based skincare made by ethical independent brands. Nice. Any of these would make great gifts, and their actual boxes are really cool as well. The outer box is actually made by a family-owned business in Rajasthan, India, from handmade tree-free paper, using a traditional paper-making technique that takes several weeks. It's very interesting. They're kind of fuzzy. Great craftsmanship. Through their book boxes, Boxwalla wants people to read the world. I can definitely get on board with that. You can check them out using the link below, and you can get 10% off your first box by using the code BetterThanFood. Thanks a bunch. So what might you or I have in common with this 18th century German physicist? Well, possibly quite a bit, it turns out. For being written in the 1700s, of course, the first thing we might be shocked or surprised at is just how readable, accessible, and fundamentally similar the thoughts and writings are to many thinkers and writers today, except very rooted in a kind of timeless wisdom with an amiable sense of humor. He's a good writer. He really seemed to be writing for himself, sincerely, for clarity, to kind of remind himself of his ideas. He must not have been writing with the intention of ever publishing it or having anybody read it. It really must have just been, for himself. That comes across, and it's not what you would think of if you were going to read a German scientist from the 1700s. It's very relatable. It's very human. It's very, very simple in a way. They're not easy thoughts, but they're easily understandable. So there's no attempt of dressing up the ideas. The point is that they be as clear and concise as possible. I didn't agree with everything that he said by any means, but I found myself agreeing with him more often than not, and nobody could read him and dispute his eloquence. I took a lot of photos and circled a lot of aphorisms. I'll read some to you. Page 6. Food probably has a very great influence on the condition of men. Wine exercises a more visible influence. Food does it more slowly, but perhaps just as surely. Who knows if a well-prepared soup was not responsible for the pneumatic pump, or a poor one for a war. Food is indeed important. The utility of systems lies not merely in their making us think about something in an ordered way according to a particular scheme, but in their making us think about it at all. The latter utility is incontestably greater than the former. Agreed. People who have read a great deal seldom make great discoveries. I do not say this to excuse laziness, for invention presupposes an extensive contemplation of things on one's own account. One must see for oneself more than let oneself be told. Honest, unaffected distrust of human abilities under all circumstances is the surest sign of strength of mind. Hear, hear, Mr. Lichtenberg. Herr Kamper, he's referring to something he's read here about a missionary who went to Greenland to, proselytize to the Greenlanders. Herr Kamper related that when a missionary painted the flames of hell to a congregation of Greenlanders in a truly vivid fashion, and described at length the heat they gave out, all the Greenlanders began to feel a strong desire to go to hell. I love that one. There are very many people who read simply to prevent themselves from thinking. Yep. A great genius will seldom make his discoveries on paths frequented by others. When he discovers things, he usually also discovers the path to discovery. Yeah, I really like that one. To express truly what one has truly felt, that is to say, with those little expressive traits that testify one is speaking of one's own experience, is what really makes the great writer. Ordinary writers always avail themselves of phrases and expressions that are nothing but clothes from the secondhand market. Being a good writer is fucking hard. I think a lot of us look at our own work and can tell it's secondhand clothing, I am certainly in that camp. I have not gotten out of the thrift shop phase. There is something quite natural in the fact that we admire great warriors, as there is in our thirst for conquest. The former corresponds to beauty and bodily strength, the latter to comfort and well-being. It will thus never be possible to philosophize these things out of the world. I believe that some of the greatest minds that have ever lived had not read half as much, and did not know nearly as much as many of our mediocre scholars. And many of our very mediocre scholars would have been greater men if they had not read so much. I think that's true. I enjoy books of aphorisms because they encourage a lot of breathing room and kind of personal thought between each one, right? You could even do like one a day or a page of them a day. That's more than enough ideas to contend with. They're like bite-sized ideas with oceanic depth. You could spend a whole day just thinking about one or two of these. There's plenty of really good ones in there, not just the ones that I read. Those are just some of my favorites. That's actually the way I would recommend reading it. I wouldn't recommend reading it the way I did, where I just go through all of it at once. I would just take a couple in every day and think about them. Just think about them, right? Just think. Stop reading. Just pulling it out and flipping to whatever notebook you're on, and just mulling over one or two of these for the day. Though if you read it all the way through, you'll see he has, like all of us, his own preoccupations, right? some topics and ideas he comes back to often. One of the largest, unsurprisingly, probably is the question of God. It's difficult to tell where exactly Lichtenberg stands by the end. I've read on Wikipedia that he was an atheist, but I'm not so sure. It seems more complicated than that, but it always is. Each of these ideas are kind of like the basis points for one of his figures, you know? It's a very appropriate cover. In this manner, here's where we start. There's the impetus, there's the idea set forth, and there's where the energy dissipates, there's where the multitude of ideas come from and grow in complex multi-branched patterns. Some of them stop, some of them continue, and some create new branches, and everything gets very complex. One of my favorite ones, and something I've been mulling over lately, is the following. Most intellectual knowledge seems to be practically useless. Book smarts don't really do anything other than allow one to regurgitate ideas that they don't really understand from their own experience in the first place. Page 26. Ba-ba-da-ba-da. We begin reading early and we often read much too much, so that we receive and retain large amounts of material without putting it into employment, and our memory becomes accustomed to keeping open house for taste and feeling. This being so, we often have need of a profound philosophy to restore our feelings their original state of innocence, to find our way out of the rubble of things alien to us, to begin to feel for ourselves and to speak ourselves, and I might almost say to exist ourselves. Yeah, finding yourself amidst all of the information that is filling itself inside your head. Being able to actually think for oneself is something that I, and a lot of us, I'd gather, take for granted that we're already doing a priori or whatever. But that's not true. That's not true at all, I don't think. I don't think we are. Like, at all. I think it's actually much, much, much harder to truly think for yourself than most people think. It's difficult because there are so many ready-made formulas that we employ already, that we just use unconsciously as a means of building our mental foundations in the day-to-day, as a means of making decisions, as a means of assuming things, assuming how things and people are and what is true and what is not. I think that we're operating on a lot of assumptions, and you can completely waste your life that way and never really figure out who you are and what you think about things really. The human body is designed to be lazy in order to conserve energy, in order to survive, right? And the brain is part of that body. I mean, it makes sense in that sense, but that's just surviving. That's not like the best life worth living, right? Your body doesn't have the kind of existential component upgrade. Your body's goal is just like, don't die. That's why your body doesn't want you to get six-pack abs, because it's like you're fucking starving yourself to death. It doesn't realize that there's an abundance of food and we're all dying from diabetes, right? Your body has other things in mind. Your body's a very wonderful, complex, complicated organic machine, but yeah, you kind of got to tell it what to do. You kind of got to trick it sometimes. So in order to break out of that pattern, right, that's the question, that mode of behavior, and truly discover what it is you, specifically you, think about the nature of life and things, to rise above the clamor and the noise and the ready-made societal assumptions that are just forced down your throat or handed to you regarding whatever, and not just parrot and regurgitate like we all do. That is radical, actually radical, and so rare because it's very difficult. That is a radically unique person in society today. So what did I take away from Lichtenberg? Well, for me personally, don't read so much. It's seriously though, it's a waste of your life. Reading does not necessarily mean that one is not wasting their time or avoiding life or avoiding many things that would bring far more satisfaction to them. Reading for reading's sake is like hammering a nail for the sake of hammering. You might get good at hammering, but you're never going to construct a house. And part of you may become grotesquely overdeveloped. Now I'm operating on the fundamental assumption that you love reading as much as I do. We both love reading, we both know how important it is to us, so don't get me wrong. But Lichtenberg is challenging the notion that it's always a good thing to be reading as much as possible, and always taking all these answers from what other people have written instead of thinking for yourself. So I think it's important to be like, is this a crutch? Am I using this in the wrong way as far as reading? Because many wonderful things can become a crutch, right? You can just eventually just depend on them. And I think that a lot of folks, myself included, have depended too much on the words of others regarding how to live their own lives or what they themselves think. They just take what others think and call it their own. But it doesn't work like that, ever. So I don't want you to get the wrong idea, right? I'm not saying reading is totally useless, and neither is Lichtenberg. Because of course it can be such a profound experience that it can completely change your life. Books can save your life. They can generate immensely powerful changes in the individual or culture. But there's like, you know, there's the whole other side where it's like, you know, for example, like insufferable philosophy or English students who are just regurgitating the best ideas of others and doing their best to parrot them. You know what I mean? That's hollow. That's stupid. It's needing somebody to hold your hand through life. It doesn't work like that. There's another one of his that reinforces this idea, which I really enjoyed. What you have to do to learn to write like Shakespeare is very far removed from reading him. Yeah. It's very interesting to see a document like this, because it allows you to see just how much in a lifetime a man transforms or doesn't. There are no radical transformations to be seen. Instead, what is observable is a refining of ideas and themes throughout his life, the ones that this person gravitated towards, maybe just by virtue of being born who he was. And of course, this makes us think of ourselves, or at least me. And I get anxious because I think of how obvious that is already at the age I am, 33. And I wonder whether or not I can change at all, really, in a radical or fundamental way. And I think the clear answer for the most part is no. And I don't mean that in a fatalistic way. Of course, there's all sorts of cosmetic things we can change about ourselves, change about our lifestyle and our habits maybe. But I mean more in like a fundamental way, in the way of our temperaments, like in our nature. And I don't think we can. I think we are who we are, basically, for the most part. I think to radically alter your temperament would take so much fucking energy that you would just really cease to be you. Maybe like a traumatic experience, like a you know, a crash or something. You hear about these people who get in like a car crash or have an accident and then they wake up and they're like a piano prodigy, shit like that. Short of like a radical near-death experience or going through a war or something, I mean, I don't know. Almost dying somehow, I really think it's very difficult to actually change. Human life is so short that that's really all there's time for, you know? Our window is so tiny. And the refinement of a set of powerful ideas that one is intuitively attracted to is not a failure by any means. In fact, that's probably the most we can hope for as far as success. It's just that seeing a work like this, it kind of contains an element of tragedy because we're forced to confront the limits of ourselves and other people. And those limits are very, very strict and very, very limited. You know, we can see the walls of time that we're trapped in. And that sparks, for me, kind of an anxious urgency. If one hates themselves, and by that I mean their behaviors or habits, I think the best answer is to learn how to like yourself. Otherwise, the sentence that you've been handed is being married for a lifetime to someone you find insufferable. And another question I'm coming to is why read? Why read? That's a pretty fundamental one for me, no? What is all this intellectual knowledge good for if you don't use it? If you don't do anything with it? Because if one has intellectual knowledge, one isn't more at peace. It's not like, you know, I've read all of Hegel or Heidegger and all of a sudden I'm just satisfied, or Kant. One isn't more at peace at all. The same problems remain, if not exacerbated. Nothing really seems to change if you can regurgitate their main ideas and parrot them to a T at, you know, whatever fucking social event you go to. One would probably learn more about oneself by watching pornography. At least if that provokes a sincere reaction. Because if one's just reading to get intellectual knowledge with no intention of doing anything with it, that's just another form of self-gratification, which is to say masturbation. Again, pornography is more sincere and less pretentious. And I'm not an advocate for pornography by any means, despite my appreciation for transgressive authors. I think pornography actually destroys transgression rather than enhancing it. Commoditizes it. It weakens it and waters it down. I mean, how many books until you're satisfied? How many cigarettes until you're satisfied? How many beers until you're satisfied? You never get there. And this even applies to like working out. You know, I just learned that I just watched a video from a bodybuilder on YouTube today talking about how Arnold Schwarzenegger came out and said that he had body dysmorphia and all that. So it's like he's looking in the mirror, literally, he's looking in the mirror when he's winning all these Olympias and he's throwing up at his own body because he's dissatisfied. And it's the same with Chris Bumstead. He's the latest big success in the bodybuilding industry. But you know, it's the same thing. How many cigarettes, how many beers, how many awards, how many medals, how many Mr. Olympias, how much weight have you lifted, how good do you look, how chiseled are you, how good is your six-pack look? And everybody is like, you know, nobody gets there and nobody realizes it's the same shit. It's the same treadmill, the Sisyphean treadmill, man. You never get there. There's nothing external that's going to give you the satisfaction you desire. There's certainly no book that will ever do that. That's my opinion. That's my hypothesis. That's my theory. That's my educated, as much as I can be, guess. Books are like cigarettes. You know, it's like Oscar Wilde. I just reviewed Oscar Wilde. He was talking about why cigarettes are perfect. But you know, I'm going to switch the word cigarette with the word book. A book is the perfect type of a perfect pleasure. It is exquisite, and it leaves one unsatisfied. Abso-fucking-lutely. So, is this to say that we should all just stop reading and do something else? Well, no, not unless you feel like that. Unless you had the wrong expectations. I'd say no. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with pornography and books and cigarettes and beer. I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong. It's not a question of right or wrong. It's just a question of, are you getting what you need out of it? There's nothing wrong with lifting weights. There's nothing wrong with any of these things. There's nothing wrong with pursuing a goal. There's nothing wrong with being the absolute greatest at something or whatever. It's just to say that it's not futile unless your expectations are incorrect, unless you think that getting that external thing is going to give you the satisfaction you desire. It won't. I guarantee you, because as soon as you get it, you'll be depressed as fuck, because then it's on to the next thing, and then you die. So that's what this book makes me think about. Just because you're reading does not make you better. Yeah, Pessoa said literature is the most agreeable way of ignoring life. Absolutely. I mean, it's very much the Faustian bargain. I mean, did Faust get the satisfaction from all the knowledge he had obtained throughout his life, from all the books he read? No, he sold his soul to the devil as a last resort, and it still didn't work. It's interesting, because I think Lichtenberg actually knew Goethe, or they met or something. It just goes to reiterate that thing they're always saying, you know, that true satisfaction is to be found internally, not externally, right? I think there's something to that. How do we achieve that? I have no idea. This all begs the question, you know, if it's clear that we're not going to get what we want by doing the things we do, why would we do it? Step one is to identify what it is you actually want. Most of us don't get there in the first place. We have a vague idea, we kind of like shoot for it, and then it doesn't work, or it works, but it's not what we thought it was, and so then we gotta like recalibrate, and then by that time we're already middle-aged, and then, oh, you know, and like things happen, and like life, you know, and we never get there anyways. But, you know, Einstein's quote, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Einstein was a fan of Lichtenberg. So what do we do? That's for every person to figure out for themselves. I think the takeaway here is asking yourself this question when you're reading a book, right? It's like, okay, I'm using this for something, but what am I using it for? Why am I reading this? When you're younger, it's certainly pleasurable to get swept up and seduced by the intensity of various books and all these different things and, you know, ooh, shiny. But when you get a bit older, the value of your time seems to increase, right? You know what I mean? Even though the value of your time, none of us know how valuable it is, I would wager. And it's just as valuable when you're younger. So the earlier you can start determining what you're doing and why you're doing it, all the better, in my opinion. So if you were to ask me, I'd say, don't just blindly read or think what other people tell you is good. You're smarter than that, and your time is more valuable. Try to intuit the things that will resonate with you most viscerally, and that does not have to be the things that everybody says are good. In fact, it may be the case that all the truly great things in any given era are detested by the modern gen pop of that era, right? You can find tons of artists, writers, musicians who were hated when they were alive, but adored when they're dead, right? It's terrible how that works. So to summarize my takeaway, I would suggest this. This is what I think Lichtenberg is getting at. Try to use reading to enhance your life, to add new depth to it, not to avoid it. That was my takeaway, at least. And you know what else I'd suggest? Start your own book of aphorisms. See where that takes you. I might do that myself. See what you come up with over the course of 20 or 30 years. I bet it'd be really interesting. You could just do one a day, you know? We all have one decent idea, at least, a day. Challenge yourself to write something yourself. Don't just read the words of others. Think, write, create. That's what Lichtenberg is trying to get across. Just think. Try and write something that is actually something you thought, and that isn't just a rehash of what somebody else thought or something you read or heard. It's very difficult. After you've read a bit, after you've read for 10, 15 years or something like that, that's probably far more valuable than reading more. At least that's what Lichtenberg would have suggested, I think. And that's what I'm suggesting to you. So what did I dislike about it? Well, yeah, I don't know. Some ideas were stronger than others. Some of the lines will resonate more with you than they did with me, and vice versa. Whatever. He never really revealed anything cataclysmic or provocative or dangerous in here. Nothing was truly risky from what I can see. This one's kind of a crowd pleaser. It's very much aligned with the morals of today and the attitudes. It's nothing spicy. So you should read it. Well, anyone who at all enjoys the authors that I mentioned at the beginning, who were a fan of Lichtenberg's, yeah, so like Nietzsche, Freud, Tolstoy, Einstein, Wittgenstein, if you are interested in reading somebody that they liked, then check this out. Better than food. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, thanks for stopping by. I take all of the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more to help support the show, and I place their names in this mason jar. And for every review I do, I pull out a name. And whoever's name I pull out is sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee right now is from El Salvador, and it is delicious. If you would like to get in on that and help support the show, I sincerely appreciate it. It really just helps keep this whole thing going in one of the most chaotic times imaginable, which I'm sure you already knew in abundance. And I really hope you're doing okay. Thank you for taking the time to watch my stupid ass. But if you're feeling very kind and would like to get in on that, you can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/betterthanfood and donate $5 or more per video. Thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate it. For $1 or more, you'll get access to the Patron-Only Reviews, the Discord channel, which is just a bunch of very awesome people who watch the show and have a whole bunch of recommendations and memes and stuff to share with each other. Bunch of good folks in there. And the Better Than Friday newsletter, which is just a weekly newsletter that lists 5 different things that I'm interested in at any given time. Could be books in the pipeline, music, films, changes week to week. If you think we have similar taste, I think you'll really enjoy those. And there's a bunch of them for you to check out. Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Sorry about that. Thank you very, very much to all the patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Stephen W. That is awesome, man. I'm going to deliver that to you in person because because you work at my gym. I met Stephen at the gym. He's an awesome guy. He's like, hey, I watch your show. I'm like, that's awesome, man. And then he became a patron. He's really nice. You're going to receive The Waste Books by Georg Christoph Lichtenberg, plus some coffee, roasted by yours truly. And I hope you love both, man. Coming your way soon. Well, that's all I've got for you today. I hope you enjoyed. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're reading something good. And if you are, please let me know in the comments below. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoy this. And always remember, bring a book wherever you go, because they are by far the best way to waste time, aside from the obvious things. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.